17th of May, 2023. Dearest Mary Ann, although you've long since passed, a fragment of your life has become known to me through the casebooks of the Bethlehem Hospital archive. I suspect this time in your long life might not be what you would choose prying eyes to focus on, but I wonder if the time you spent in Bethlehem, like mine 130 years later, was so terrifying and profound that it left a curiously deep imprint, one that you couldn't help but revisit time and time again. All I have are the doctor's notes from your Bethlehem inpatient stay, 8th of March to 11th of April 1888, written as short bi-daily observations, and the summaries of your symptoms as expressed by your husband, James Jones, and the 2 local doctors just prior to admission. They hold little, if anything, of your experience as you experienced it. You had 9 children by age 43. I had 2 at 40. It blows my mind as to how much hard work caring for 9 children, 2 under 10 years old, would be. I read that your 3rd youngest, Annie Phoebe Jones, aged 15 at the time, was critically unwell with lung inflammation and abscess of the abdomen. Naturally, you couldn't leave her side to sleep. You knew her life was in great danger. The intensity and horror of your Annie's illness and your 36 hours of sleeplessness, cradling and praying with all your might that the situation was not real and that she would recover, was too much to bear. I understand that. As mothers, I think we can often feel our children suffering quite acutely. I therefore wasn't surprised to read you also complained of experiencing abdominal pain. I think there's a name for it, empathic feeling of loved one's pain, and of course the anxiety and fear must have been crippling. I learnt that one of your first hallucinations, which occurred while sitting nursing Annie, was witnessing the devil dancing in the fire. How horrifying that must have been. I was somewhat relieved to read that you also reported an angel on your shoulder, and later that Jesus communicated with you through written letters. I imagine that was a great comfort. I project from my own experience that those beings of white light, whether overlaid on real physical form or as part of pure hallucination, delusion, do help soothe the terror and perceived danger of the deepest dark forces. Made me smile when reading that you took a great dislike to the doctor, as I did to one of mine. You thought he wanted to keep you away from your daughter's room. It's highly likely, I would say, that this fear was wholly justified and not irrational in the slightest. I imagine he probably wanted you to sleep, but how can you when your daughter's at death's door? Still, undoubtedly we must look after ourselves if we are to be fit enough to look after our babies. I too didn't manage this well. The intense lack of sleep, stress from birthing twins, one fighting for her life awaiting surgery, the other struggling in the heat, expressing milk, feeding, the bleeping from the medical machines, was all too much and soon caught up with me too. I hope despite the bruising on your body they mention, bruising on my arms was not mentioned, and the overwhelming pain you were suffering, you felt cared for during your stay at Bethlehem. I hear that at the time of your inpatient stay, private patients, PP, often had better experiences. It's somewhat remarkable to think that from the time you were admitted to discharge as documented recovered was only 1 month, and that was without antipsychotic medication. Needlework, they note, kept you occupied, and perhaps was used to self-hypnotise during your own mending period once your insight resurfaced. I'm reminded of the null and void existence that Antonia White mentions in her book Beyond the Glass, and the sense of life as rows of plain knitting, the repetitive acceptable pleasantry from dull motion. Perhaps so this needlework was more than pleasant to you, and in my experience the soothing nature of such work is often necessary as a stepping stone back to what I hope was for you eventually a joyful, fully alive and present time. It says in your notes that you popped back to the hospital to seek advice in the September, as although you slept well, you felt depressed, and I imagine with your youngest child at 2.5, 3 years, you got little time to yourself to recuperate once discharged home. Nevertheless, it feels encouraging you were drawn to come back. Perhaps overall you felt supported and were grateful for the care you had at Bethlehem. From what I've discovered, you lived another 42 years after your admission, and I hope, despite the dreadful void from your dear daughter Annie's passing, that they were happy ones. You look a very strong, determined woman to me. I like to think, had we been on earth at the same time, we would have been friends. Sending love to you, dear Mary Ann, and all your family in heaven. Your fellow Bethlehem comrade, Emma.